A couple months ago, I was scrolling through social media and I saw an announcement of a pre-release of a book that caught my attention. I was intrigued and I was thinking about all that we have faced over the last few years and all that lies ahead. And I don't care how much shabuzi you listen to, things aren't going to get any easier, okay? And so as I reached out, looked at, pre-ordered the book, I got some of the pre-release content and I'm reading through it. And I just kind of sense God say, our church needs this. Like our community needs this. So I reached out to the author, asked if she would be interested and available to help or if we could use some of that material for our weekend service, and she was thrilled. And if you've been around, you know Barb Roose, you've heard Barb Roose, but what you may not know is that we've actually known each other for over 30 years. We worked together for over 10 here at Cedar Creek. And 10 years ago, she left staff to start her writing and speaking kind of career. And now, 5 books later, 7 published Bible studies later, she is pretty well known around the country. I mean, she's a featured speaker at Aspire and Proverbs 31 and She Speaks Conference. She is known nationally, but she loves her church here locally. She regularly attends. This past summer, she said yes to an invitation to join our board. But what I love most about Barb is who she is as a person. Yes, she has accomplished a lot. She has also been through a lot, but it's her faith, her grit, and her grace that inspire me. We were talking just a couple days ago about how when I first started serving in Cedar Creek Kids, I would hold her kids and her kids would grow up to watch mine. She is an incredible friend, especially to my wife. And even though I can't seem to get her a preach-off win, she still says yes to my invite to be a part of my team every year. So I am really excited about the content that we have for this series, especially in light of what happened yesterday on the football field, okay? Stronger than stress. But I'm even more excited about what God has for you through the next few weeks. And so would you please give Barb Roose a warm Cedar Creek welcome to kick off this series.
Everyone, it's so good to be with you. Ben, thank you. As Ben said, we've known each other for a very long time. This church has been my home. Every week that I am not on the road traveling, I'm here, and it's usually at the 11 o'clock service. So hello, friends. I'm usually scooting in about 5 after. So it's nice to be here right now. And so this is such a sweet weekend to be with you. And we are going to talk about stress. And sometimes talking about stress can be stressful, but I promise you that we're going to walk into this series and walk you through this series in such a way that I believe that God can bring hope and encouragement as well as real change into whatever you're experiencing. Now, stress hits us all in different ways. And I thought perhaps we can kind of lift things up, lighten things up a little bit by talking about what is most stressful for you. Like how does some certain things hit you? For example, what would be more stressful for you? Public speaking, like standing here doing what I'm doing, or having to go to the dentist. If public speaking would be more stressful for you, let me see your hands. Okay, well, that's a pretty good part of the room. You guys, this isn't that bad. How about going to the dentist? Who would that be much more stressful? There's a lot. So any dentists in the room? These people have not been in a while. What would be more stressful for you? Let's say losing your cell phone or having less than a quarter tank of gas. Who would be losing your cell phone? Oh, Gen Z or pop their hand up immediately. Like, that's a crisis. Okay, a good number of you. How about less than a quarter tank of gas? Let me see my boomer friends and Gen Xers. All right. Final one, and I've got a picture. Which one would be more stressful? Somebody taking a random chunk out of a cake. Or walking in the bathroom and someone had squeezed the middle out your toothpaste. What would be more stressful? Who would say the random cake? Every mom out there is like, yes. Those of you who didn't raise your hands, you're the one who did it. What about somebody squeezing the tube out of the middle of your toothpaste? Really? See, that does not bother me. Like, doesn't it matter? It just comes out. Who are the roll up the people from the bottom? Who are you? I just need to know. Oh, okay, that's good to know. All right. Well, as we know, stress hits us all differently. And as a writer For me, I know that often the task in writing is for me to tackle the topics of what I know. And so for me, having a book and a Bible study on stress tells you that it's been a long journey for me. I had my first experience of burning out at 16 years old. I didn't even know it was burnout. I just know that I spent a whole day in the guidance counselor's office because I was overwhelmed with school and sports and work. And I would spend a lot of years cycling in and out of stress and burnout and overwhelm. When I was 29 years old, I had left a career in pharmaceutical sales, and I took over as the executive director of a nonprofit here in Toledo. And I thought that God had led me to this job. But it was 8 months later, and I was crying every day. I was having trouble sleeping. Severe memory issues. I was losing it with my kids all of the time. And burnout caused me to leave that job within 1 year. 2 months after that, I joined a Cedar Creek group. Back then, this group had a name. It was in 2002, and it was called Leading Ladies. And it was a year-long women's group, and it was there that I learned about spiritual practices for the first time. And the subtitle of the Stronger Than Stress book is 10 Spiritual Practices to Win the Battle of Overwhelm. And during that experience, I learned what it meant to connect with God in a uniquely different way. I'd grown up in the church, but the way that I was told that we had a relationship with God was we had to keep doing things for God. And so it was about how many times you read your Bible, making sure you made it to church every week, how many minutes you prayed. But I learned about spiritual practices that were these rhythms, these ways of connecting with God, that instead of me thinking about what God wanted from me, spiritual practices helped me to see what God wanted for me, that He wanted His peace and His grace. And so this book and Bible study are about equipping you to experience the unforced rhythms of grace, which lead to greater peace and strength every day. The central theme of the book is if you want to be stronger than your stress, then Jesus must be the core of your strength. Because the world is not getting any less stressful. Your lives are not getting any less stressful. When you think you've hit your stress limit for the day, I love the Lindsay Lohan line, you discover that the limit does not actually exist. All of a sudden, things keep piling on, and the pressure is so much. In a survey from the American Psychological Association, 66% of people say that financial stress is putting an untenable pressure on their lives. It is keeping them up at night. It is stressing them out during the day. 57% of people, over half, are just worried about getting food on the table and keeping a roof over their head. This one loops in most of us. 77% of people are feeling extreme stress at work every single month. If parents, did you know that the Surgeon General about 2 weeks ago put out a public health warning on parenting? The Surgeon General said that parental stress is so debilitating that it is actually a public health issue. Now, these statistics are sobering. And some of you are like, you didn't need numbers to tell you what you are already living. But what I want you to know today is that if you have been feeling the weight, if you have been feeling like how can you get through what you are going through, that you aren't alone, that people around you understand what you are going through. But I'm going to mess with you here for a moment. What if I told you that God created stress? What if I told you that God created you to have a stress response for a reason? I've used this word a lot, but let me clarify what stress is. It is your body's response to how you're handling the world around you. We're going to talk about the other things that we think are stress, but this is legit what stress is. It is an internal barometer as to how you are processing the world that you live in. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to show you how your body exhibits the stress response. But God put within you a system in your brain called the autonomic nervous system. And this is a subconscious system that is running in the background that you know nothing about until there is a physical threat. So let's say that you are walking along and all of a sudden you see a lion. This is what happens next when your body sees or when your brain picks up on a physical threat to your mortality. And so your brain, in that autonomic nervous system, it sends out a signal to an area above your kidneys called the adrenal glands, and then adrenaline, also known as epinephrine, goes out into your body as well as cortisol. That's when your heart starts beating faster. That's when your blood is circulating. It's when your rational thinking goes on pause, your digestion goes on pause, because your muscles are going to tense and you are going to take action. And this is all happening before you even notice. And when the physical threat is over, cortisol brings your body and your heart rate back down and your blood pressure. Now, once upon a time, you know what people actually had? They had lions chasing them. They had physical threats where their lives were in danger, and that stress response had them take action, because when your stress response is happening, your brain, that rational thought, it goes on pause, because you don't need to be thinking about, is that a lion? Does it look like a lion? Maybe it's just a big cat. You got to go. When your brain says, girl, you in trouble, you don't have time to stop and think about it. But here's the thing. Even though we don't have lions running around, well, wait a minute. Don't the Lions play this afternoon, the Detroit Lions? We do have lions running around today. And anybody who thought that I actually knew that without Luke Shortridge telling me, y'all. We don't have physical lions chasing us, but we have emotional lions. And emotional lions are the non-physical threats that you and I pick up on and perceive every day. Emotional lions are when you open up a bill and it's an unexpected expense and your heart starts racing and your muscles tense up and your eyes dilate. And you're like, what do I do? What do I do? It's when you see a suspicious text message on your child's phone or a spouse's. It's before you go into that meeting and your heart starts to race and your muscles start to tense up and you start to feel that sense of doom. This is the stress response. These are the emotional lions inside of you. In the Stronger Than Stress book, I identify what I call the stress starters. Whenever you experience what is uncomfortable, unexpected, uncertain, or uncontrollable, those have the ability to start that stress response in you. And the issue is that we don't have physical threats like we don't have physical threats all day, every day. But these emotional lions are being set off from the time we wake up all throughout our day. And the equivalent to you is you are all day long, your heart is beating faster and your muscles are tense. And that's going off, being set off all day. It's like getting in your car, turning on your car, and then pressing the gas pedal all the way to the floor and leaving it like that all day long. And what happens to your car over time when you have the pedal down to the floor and you are fully revved all day long? At a certain point, your car's components are going to start wearing and tearing and breaking down. The stress response, when you are physically in danger, your body has a way to re-regulate itself and bring itself back down. Cortisol actually plays a role in it. But here is the aha moment some of you may not be aware of, that your body doesn't know the difference between a physical threat and a perceived threat. Whereas when you have a physical threat and that cortisol brings your heart rate back down, your body, when you have perceived threats happening all day long, that stress stays in your body because it's not being released in physical action. And so I want to bring Nate out because I want you to see a visual demonstration of what that stress looks like stored in your body. And so let's give Nate a hand. And so, Nate, you got a nice little handy-dandy balloon there. And so this is where a demonstration of, I want you to see how the pressure builds up in you. Now, just so that you know, God created stress. That means that stress is not bad. In fact, there's a healthy kind of stress called eustress. This is a productive stress. And so Nate's going to put a little air in his balloon, and it's going to represent eustress, because you have to have a little bit of something happening, just like you need to have a little bit of blood pressure. If you have 0 blood pressure, then say hi to Jesus for me, right? So you've got to have a little bit. Now, this balloon, you can see it's got some give. Sorry, I just stabbed you with my nail. It's got some give in it, and that is healthy and it's productive. But we've got other kinds of stress inside of us. And if you want to kind of simulate this, even though you don't have a balloon, you can kind of create just a little small imaginary balloon in your lap if you want to. We've got emotional distress. This is the stress that we carry inside of us. This is past traumas that you haven't dealt with, perhaps PTSD. This is if you have a stressful event in your life, a relationship breakup, perhaps the birth of a child, because sometimes good things can cause stress. You lose a job, a divorce. And so if you have emotional distress in your life emotional distress you're carrying around, add a little air to your imaginary balloon, and Nate's going to do the same. Ooh, the balloon's getting bigger. Now we've got empathetic distress. This is the stress that you feel because other people around you are struggling. Some of you are feeling the stress because you have adult kids who are having a hard time and you can't fix it and you can't change it. Or perhaps you've got an elderly parent or a loved one and they are hurting and it is making things difficult, or you're watching the news and there are people in places who are going through hard times and it is breaking your heart and you are so worried and concerned. And so if you have empathetic distress, put some air in your balloon, and Nate will do the same. I did. It was a good squeak. And then finally, we have chronic stress. And this is the day in, day out stress where you wake up and you are experiencing emotional lions all day long. You're living on pins and needles. You're always waiting for something to go wrong. You're always thinking that something is going to go bad and terrible. And so, Nate, put some air in your balloon. And if you have a lot of chronic stress, put air in your balloon. And some of you right now are wondering, is Nate's balloon going to pop? You are kind of concerned. Nate, go ahead and tie that up. That balloon is big. Looks a little uncomfortable because it's stretched to the limit, isn't it? Who feels like your life is this balloon right now? Nate, thank you. Let's give him a hand. And so we have this balloon that we have all of this stress that is stored up inside of us. This is what I call the lifestyle of stress. This is when you are waking up and from sunup to sundown, you are stretched thin. You are maxed out and you're trying to make decisions. You're trying to figure out how to get through the day, and you are so stretched thin. And as you have this much pressure in your life, all it takes is a bad argument with your boss. It takes a fight with a spouse, something with your kids, and you pop. We've all been there. Who is impacted by your stress when you pop? Because when we walk around in this lifestyle of stress and we are constantly under pressure and we don't have the tools to deal with it, unresolved chronic stress will come out in unhealthy ways. And so today the plan is for you and I to talk about this bottom line. It is that take your stress to God instead of taking it out on those who are closest to you. Now, this is a space where I know that some of you right now, you're like, yep, I have lost it recently. Might have screamed at some kids, perhaps yelled at a spouse, and there could be a temptation right now for you to kind of withdraw into guilt or even close off what I'm about to say. But I want you to lean into this because I believe that God has something for all of us this morning. And trust me, I get it. I'm the parent of 3 adult kids who are 31, 28, and 24. Once upon a time, I was married for 26 years. And for me, there were times in my life where I did not handle my stress well. And you know what? I was working hard. I was doing the best that I could. I was kind of like Bruce Banner, you know, in Marvel movies where he was like doing this thing and he was living his life. And then there was a moment where just something set him off. And then he turned into a Hulk. And what does the Hulk do? Smash. Smash. How many of us have smashed the people that we either love or lead or let into our lives with our words? We have smashed them, slamming the doors, saying things that we shouldn't say, or maybe even smashing with silence. There's a lot of different ways that our stress response comes out back toward the people that we love. Some of us choose the fight mode. These are the survival responses. You start arguments, or there's yelling, or you got control issues. Others of us go with the flight response, where we're so stressed out, and instead of dealing with our stress, we go find a bunch of activities to distract ourselves. It can look like hobbies. It can look like, for me, I became a workaholic during those years. Others freeze, where you just withdraw and numb. This is where we've got the risk of addictions or inappropriate relationships. You're just trying to numb out, overeating, just sitting in front of the TV all day long, not engaged with the people in your life. Or there's fawn, people-pleasing. That is a stress response. Lack of boundaries. You're so stressed out, you just let people walk all over you. And here's the thing. I know that it's hard to come to terms with how you act out your stress on others, because for some of you, and I could be wrong, but there's this thought that you are living under this amount of stress and pressure because you are hoping that one day it's going to pay off. You've been hoping that all of your hard work, all of your effort at your job, all of the things that you're doing around the house, you're hoping that one day in the future you're going to get the promotion. One day in the future it's going to pay off because you're going to reach that income level. One day it's going to pay off because you're going to get the dream house. One day it's going to pay off because the kids will be out of the house and it'll just be the two of you. That there's this land out there somewhere. And so what we are facing now, if I blow up at the kids, does that matter? It's going to pay off one day. If I yell at my spouse, they don't recognize it. It's going to pay off one day. If my employees hate me, you know what? It's all right. I'm working my way up the ladder. And so we act out our stress, but we don't consider the long-term consequences. There's a phenomena out there called no contact. And this is it's an approach that millennials and Gen Xers have taken because their parents did not handle their stress well. And so these adults grew up and they stopped having contact with their parents. Now, I'm not saying, especially for parents out there, if you're listening and you have a no-contact kid, I'm not saying that it was you across the board. But what I'm saying that in a world of the stress levels that we have, in a world where there is so much putting pressure on us, if you have not been handling your stress well, the people that you love, the people that you lead, the people that you let into your lives, they are all keeping an internal bank account of every horrible word, every slam door, every single thing. But there is hope, friends. There is hope for the pressure that you are facing today. And so we're going to talk about how you can take your stress to God so that you don't take it out on those closest to you. Jesus tells us, I have told you all of this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. Jesus was clear that the world was going to give us more than we could handle. Some of us are mad because we think that the world should be easier, especially if you're a Christian. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that you become a Christian and life is supposed to get easier. The Stronger Than Stress book and Bible study, I actually used the life of the Apostle Paul as the biblical anchor for the book. And he actually encountered more problems after he became a Christian. And so some of the anger that we have or the frustration is because we think life is supposed to be easier. And that's not what it is. And Jesus is up front. But here's the thing. Jesus says, you can have peace in me. And the peace that Jesus is talking about, this isn't a peace where you just are calmer or you can kind of keep your temper in check. Jesus' peace, the Hebrew word is shalom, the Greek word is irene, and it means a wholeness. Because stress is trying to crush us or tear us apart. And Jesus is saying, peace in me, wholeness in me, where you can hold it together, that the forces of life can come at you, that the things can be out of control, uncertain, uncomfortable, unexpected, and you don't have to lose your load. Because think about it, what I think is true about you and what you want to be true about yourself is that you want to love and care about the people in your life. And the struggle for you is that you have not been able to do it because you've been trying to handle these problems and you're not handling them well. Jesus is saying you can have peace in me. And because of that, you can take heart, you can have courage. That when we recognize that peace is a person in Jesus, that changes our perspective on how we see those emotional lions. Because where we focus on problems, Jesus leads with his peace. But how do we live this out? What does it practically look like? Well, Paul is writing to a group of believers. He was a first century pastor. He was a church planner. And there was this group of Christians who had a lot of struggles and trials, and they were trying to apply their best human thinking to what they were going through. And so Paul writes this letter because they needed an attitude change and a perspective shift. And he says, we are human, but we don't wage war as humans do. We use God's mighty weapons, not worldly weapons, to knock down the strongholds of human reasoning and to destroy false arguments. We destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture their rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Christ. And so he's got a lot he's saying here. Let's go ahead and get into it. He starts off with saying we are humans, but we don't wage war as humans do. We are human, friends. We are not perfect. We have said and we have done things that have hurt the heart of God and have hurt others. Some of you grew up in families where the only way stress was expressed was through anger or violence, abuse, unhealthy behaviors. And so that is the only template, that is the only thing you saw. But in Jesus, you can have peace and wholeness. There can be healing for that. It may have run in your family, but it can run out with you. You can change how the trajectory of not just your life, but the life of your family. It may run in your family, but it can run out with you. And we also will experience these stressful moments in life. We may lose jobs, people may die, we might go through breakups. And so we are human, but when you know better, when God equips you to do better, you have to choose better. Amen? The next part is we don't wage war as humans do. There is a war. There is an enemy of your soul, and what his desire is for you to destroy your lives because of stress. Chronic stress is a spiritual issue. When everything is setting you off all day long, you do not have a physical mortal threat. Fear, anxiety, control, when those things are setting you off all day long, that's a spiritual problem. And the enemy, he wants you to get set off all day long. He wants you to lose your load all of the time. In the book, we have an important conversation about stress versus stressors. Remember, stress is your reaction to the world around you. And the enemy wants you to react to everything around you. And that reaction can often lead to you blaming everything and everyone around you. Stress is how you are responding to the world around you, but stressors, Those are the people, places, or things you're reacting to. And the issue is that we're confusing the two. We say, my kids are stressing me out. My job is stressing me out. My friends are stressing me out. The people I work with are stressing me out. Your response to them is what is stressing you out. Because if you don't have this clear, Satan wants you to confuse your reactions with your relationships in hopes that you will destroy your relationships with your reactions. Do you get that? He wants you to blame your spouse for your stress. He wants you to blame your kids, to blame your job, to blame your friends, to blame your coworkers, because when you blame them, they become the enemy. And what do you do with enemies? You fight with enemies. You try to subdue them, try to take them down. And even though you love them, you care about them, you will, on accident, weaponize your stress, and that will ruin the relationship. This could be an aha moment for some of you. It is that your response is your responsibility. How you handle your stress is your responsibility. And so I want to create a pause right now for some of you to separate out your stress from the people you may be blaming. And am I saying that what they're doing is right or correct or whole? I am not saying that what they're doing is okay. If you know anything about my story, you know that my family and I went through a decade-long addiction crisis in my household. And the opening of the Stronger Than Stress book, I feature a story of a very bad day when I did not handle my stress well, and it involved a dish rack of dishes and a broken kitchen window. Even though it was not me causing the problem, how I responded was my responsibility. Because I, in my hurt and in my pain, had turned them into the enemy. And so I want to do something with you that I hope starts to shift this in you. It's called the Stress Clarity Exercise. It's in your message notes, and you can find a link to that also. It's got a page number in the book, as well as a link to the book in the Bible study. But this is an exercise to help you separate out someone or something that you may have made the enemy. And so this exercise is simple. You want to do blank is not the cause of my stress. Who is it that you've been blaming for your stress? Has it been a teenager that won't straighten up and act right? Is it a spouse that's been driving you crazy? A particular coworker? Your finances? What is it? Elderly parents? What is it that you have been blaming? They are not the cause of your stress. And even though I feel blank, friends, get real. You can be real with God. Get real about the anger, the frustration, the betrayal, the disappointment, the sadness. Be real about that here. Because of, and then whoever it is or whatever it is that's been causing you stress, I will not blame them or my reactions on it or them. They are not the enemy. Don't believe the lie that they are. And once you've created that clarity, you need tools to fight with. Paul says we use God's mighty weapons, not worldly weapons, to knock down strongholds of human reasoning and to destroy false arguments. You see, you and I, we have some flimsy human weapons that we're going with. It's usually often control. In my Surrender Bible study, I write about the shine, control, loving behaviors. I know many of you have done Surrendered, and these shine, control, loving behaviors can look like stonewalling, where you're digging your heels in, helicoptering, where you're micromanaging people. There's interrupting, where you get in there and you try to manipulate people and make them do what you want to do. There's nagging. I don't think I need to explain that, right? Then there's excessive planning. And we use these human weapons to try to deal with our stress. And as Paul was writing to this group of believers, they were facing spiritual opposition and they were trying to use human weapons. Friends, the reason why chronic stress needs God's mighty weapons is because it is kicking your butt. You have tried to deal with it on your own. Remember, this is a spiritual issue. When everything is setting you off all day long, where you're afraid of it, or you're anxious of it, or it's frustrating you, or it's making you angry, that is a stronghold in your life. And you need God's mighty weapons because God's weapons are more effective than your willpower. Your willpower, no matter how hard you try, it's not getting it done. And it's actually doing damage to you because every time you fail and you say something because you were stressed to the people that you love or you care about, and you feel guilt and you see the hurt on their face. Do you want to not have that happen? So I'm going to teach you about 2 tools that you can start using today, because when you use God's mighty weapons, this is what happens. We then are able to destroy every obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. If you call yourself a follower of Jesus Christ, and yet you are losing it on your people, losing it on the people around you, how are people seeing God's love shining through you? When we use God's mighty weapons, it gives us the ability to capture their rebellious thoughts, to capture what the things in our mind that's telling us you're in trouble and this is going to go horrible and you're going to lose it all and what's wrong with you and oh my gosh, if you don't fix it, everything's going to fall apart. When you have God's mighty weapons, you can take all of that captive. And you can lay it down before God and say, what I know is the truth about God, that this is hard, but Jesus is the peace that will get me through what I am going through. Amen. But it's not just about this message. I hope that this message resonates with you. But to break strongholds, you need strength. And so part of the tool, part of what I love doing, as Ben and I go through this series, we're going to walk you through some of the spiritual practices that are creating these rhythms so that you can begin to allow God's Spirit to walk with you through changing the stress response. The very first spiritual practice that we're going to talk about right now, the first one in the book is surrender. And surrender is something that people struggle with because surrender feels like you're like, oh my gosh, I got to hang in there and I've got to fight. My oldest child is an Army officer who is on faculty at West Point. And when my oldest was a student, I used to have to have to kind of proof papers, because when your mom's a writer, who better to proof your papers? Except for, there's a lot of stuff that my oldest wrote about that I didn't understand. But I learned a lot about military strategy and surrender. Surrender is a strategy that you use when you know that you do not have the capacity to win, when the challenges far exceed your ability to be successful. Surrender is not giving up, and it's not giving in to hopelessness. But in a military context, surrender is giving yourself over so that you can survive to have a chance of thriving again one day. And in a spiritual context, surrender is giving over what you can't change or control to God and saying, God, I trust you to take care of what I can't. If surrender had to be summed up in a very simple prayer, it's this: God, I can't, but you can. I will let you. Amen. If you think about what has been creating the spiritual issue of chronic stress in your life right now, do you need to pray this prayer? Do you need to take a moment and release to God what you can't change or control on your own? This is in the message notes if you need to have a moment later. And the second thing I want to share with you, and this is an exercise we're going to do as we wrap up. It's called the hands up and hands down. The studies tell us that whenever we complete a stress moment in our lives, it's actually helpful for us to do something spiritual with our bodies. It's kind of a mind, heart, soul kind of connection. And so the hands up, hands down exercise is easy. You're just going to lay your palms on your thighs. Very easy. And there is a prayer that you can do, and this is the prayer of laying down. And you can do this when you get home, if you work outside the home, if you work in the home, you do it before you leave an office. If you are a parent or maybe a stay-at-home mom, do it in the bathroom. The only time you get to be free. But here's the prayer, palms down. God, I am at home, and I'm about to walk into the house and be with the people I love. I need to surrender my frustrations about, and you can fill in the blank. My disappointment's over, be real with God here, and my anger about. Lay that down, and then flip your palms up. And the next part of the prayer, again, this is in the sermon notes. God, I recognize your presence with me right now. I receive your peace. I ask for your patience with whatever that is. And I pray that my words and actions convey your peace and grace and love to those that I love. This is a simple exercise that I'm going to ask you to do this week. And I want you to imagine if you prayed that prayer in the morning before you went out and joined your family. Imagine if you prayed that prayer before you stepped into your place of work, before a meeting where you laid down what was stressful and you asked God to give you his peace. Imagine if you prayed this before a difficult conversation with a spouse or with a teenager. When you take your stress to God, not only does he take care of you by giving you a chance to release what's the pent-up pressure inside of you, but imagine how beautiful it will be to take care of the people that you love as a result. Will you pray with me? God, we are grateful that you are the God of peace. That when life is too much for us, God, it is not too much for you. And so, Lord, I pray for those, God, who have been living in chronic stress. That, God, there is the conviction that today needs to be the last day that they're going to live like this. And that there would be the commitment to you, that they